A rainy weekend is annoying. Your shoes get wet. Traffic slows down. Maybe your laundry smells weird because you forgot it outside. You check the weather app, complain a little, and wait for the sun to come back. Now, imagine the rain does not stop tomorrow, or the next day, or the day after that. No dry house, no waterproof jacket, no spare socks, no lighter, no delivery food, no emergency shelter, no little radar map telling you, don't worry, the storm will pass in 2 hours. For ancient humans, endless rain was not bad weather. It was a survival test. Most people imagine ancient rain as simple discomfort. Wet hair, cold hands, a smoky cave, a miserable night. But the real danger was bigger than being uncomfortable. Rain did not have to kill you directly. It only had to make warmth, food, movement, shelter, and fire harder every hour. A safe path could become a stream of brown water. A dry hollow could become a trap. A warm camp could become a cold, smoking shelter where every hide, branch, tool, and strand of hair seemed to hold the rain. So how did ancient humans survive when the rain wouldn't stop? The answer was not one clever trick. It was a whole system. Stay dry enough. Keep fire alive. Find food when the land changed. Know when to stay. Know when to move. And above all, remember what happened the last time the sky refused to clear. Imagine a small group pressed beneath a rock, overhang at the edge of a forest. Rain hammers the leaves above them, runs down the stone in silver threads, and drums against stretched animal hides tied between branches. It has been raining for 3 days. Maybe 4. 3. No one knows when it will stop. The ground beneath them has turned soft and dark. Smoke from the hearth hangs low because the air is heavy with moisture. Children sit close to adults, not only because they are frightened, but because bodies are heat. And heat is now the first battle, not food. Not hunting, not tools, heat. Because the first danger of endless rain was exposure. Exposure means your body is losing heat faster than it can replace it. Not because the weather has to be freezing, but because water steals warmth. Wet skin loses heat much faster than dry skin. Wet clothing, or the prehistoric version of it, damp hides, soaked fibers, wet fur, cold bedding, pulls warmth away from the body. Even in temperatures well above freezing, a person who cannot dry out can slip toward hypothermia, especially if they are tired, hungry, injured, very young, or old. That is the quiet danger. Not one dramatic moment, not a giant wave, not a lightning strike, just hour after hour of wet skin, weak sleep, cold hands, and a body slowly losing the fight. A small cut softened by dirty water could become infected. Smoke-filled air inside a cramped shelter could irritate lungs. Cold mud beneath the body could steal warmth through the night. Days of poor sleep could weaken everyone's ability to move, hunt, gather, carry children, protect fire, or make good decisions. Ancient survival was not always heroic. Sometimes it was just trying not to become too cold to think clearly. So, the first question was simple. Where do we shelter? And ancient people were not wandering randomly until they got lucky. The evidence is not a movie scene. It is quieter than that. Cave floors with old hearths. Rock shelters used again and again. Post holes where temporary structures once stood. Rare traces of reeds, bark, grass, branches, and fibers used to shape living spaces. These clues do not prove one exact rainy day, but they do show repeated strategies for shelter, fire, and temporary living spaces. Small clues, but they point to the same thing. Ancient people were not just hiding from rain. They were engineering dry enough spaces. They learned landscapes in detail. Which slope drained well? Which cave smoked badly? Which riverbank looked safe in dry weather but vanished after heavy rain? Which overhang blocked wind? Which hollow collected water? Which patch of ground stayed firm after days of mud? Not every shelter was a good shelter. A low cave could collect water. A deep cave could trap smoke if the fire had poor ventilation. A camp too close to a river might offer fish and fresh water one day, then become a current of debris the next. Dense tree cover could soften rainfall, but falling branches were a danger. A windbreak of brush and hide could save body heat, but if built in the wrong place, it became a soaked wall leaning into camp. The goal was not to become perfectly dry, That was often impossible. The goal was to stay dry enough to sleep, dry enough to protect children, dry enough to keep a coal alive, dry enough that skin did not soften and chill hour after hour. Animal hides could shed some water if angled properly. Bark sheets could act like shingles. Bundles of grass or reeds could be layered over frames. Moss, leaves, and brush could be packed beneath sleeping places to lift bodies off wet ground. In some camps, people may have laid down skins, branches, or simple wooden platforms to reduce the loss of heat into mud and stone. The smallest choices mattered. Keep children away from the edge of the shelter. Turn the opening away from the wind. Store dry, tinder high. Keep tools from swelling, rust-like damage, or rot. Save one dry corner, as if it were treasure. Because in endless rain, a dry corner was treasure. This was survival at its most intimate, not spears raised against giant animals. Not a dramatic final stand, more like someone wringing water from a hide. An elder pointing toward higher ground, a parent shifting a child away from the drip line, someone moving a smoking branch 3 inches so the flame does not die. Very glamorous stuff. Cold mud, wet knees, smoke in your eyes, and everyone pretending they are not miserable. But that was survival. Shelter could slow the cold. It could hold a group together through the first brutal days. But even the best shelter meant little if the rain killed the one technology that made a wet world survivable. Fire. Fire was not just a pleasant glow in the corner of a shelter. In a world without waterproof clothing, electric light, antibiotics, or metal stoves, fire was a survival system. It turned soaked hides into something wearable again. It made roots, shellfish, meat, and tough plant foods safer and easier to digest. It pushed back darkness. It discouraged animals that hunted by night. It hardened wooden spear points. It warmed hands stiff from cold rain. It gave people a place to gather when the outside world had become too dangerous to move through. And in long rain, that system was constantly under attack. Today, if a storm knocks out the power, you reach for a lighter, matches, a gas burner, maybe a flashlight. For ancient humans, making flame could mean scraping sparks from stone and iron-rich minerals, or drilling one piece of wood against another until heat became an ember. Even in good weather, that took skill. In wet weather, it could become exhausting. Tinder absorbed moisture from the air. Grass, moss, bark fibers, and leaves that should have caught a spark instead smoked, blackened, and died. Fuel hissed as water boiled out of it. Wind could shred a young flame in seconds. Every failed attempt cost energy. And energy mattered. Cold fingers are clumsy. Hungry bodies tire quickly. A person kneeling in damp earth, blowing carefully into a bundle of tinder, was spending breath, heat, time, and hope. So the smartest strategy was often not to make fire from nothing. It was to keep fire alive. Ancient hearths, charcoal layers in cave floors, burned bones cracked for marrow, heat-altered stones, and reddened sediments show that fireplaces were central and used again and again. Those traces cannot show every hand shielding a coal from rain. But they tell us fire was not casual. It was a responsibility. Across many human societies, people have banked embers under ash, fed hearths slowly through the night, carried smoldering material from camp to camp, and treated fire almost like something alive. Because in a practical sense, it was. It had to be fed, protected, moved, watched, and revived before it disappeared. Imagine someone before sleep pushing glowing coals into a bed of ash. The ash starves the coals of open air, but not completely. It insulates them. It hides them. It keeps a red heart alive beneath the gray surface. By morning, if all goes well, a breath, a twist of dry fiber, and a few slivers of wood can bring the hearth back. That is not just fire making, that is fire saving. In other cases, people may have carried slow-burning punk wood, fungus, bark, or other smoldering material wrapped in leaves, hide, or bark containers, protected from rain as carefully as food. A coal did not need to be a flame. It only needed to survive long enough to become one again. Someone likely had to watch it, not as a formal job title. No one was walking around saying, "Congratulations, you are now assistant manager of ember protection," but as a shared duty. An elder awake with aching joints, a parent feeding a baby, a young person trusted to stay alert through the darkest hours. Add too much fuel, and the shelter fills with smoke or sparks. Add too little, and the coals fade. Let rainwater run across the hearth, and days of effort may vanish. Even fuel became a lesson learned by touch. A dry stick feels lighter and snaps cleaner. Wet wood thuds. Resin announces itself with scent. Inner bark may be soaked outside, but dry enough inside to catch. These were not casual observations. They were the difference between a smoky failure and a night that could be survived. Around that fire, people could repair tools, dry sinew cordage, warm stone, cook slowly, and see one another's faces. The flame made a small human island inside a drowning world. But once warmth and light were protected, the next battle began. Food. After days of rain, the world no longer gave up its secrets easily. A hunter stepping out from camp would not see the same landscape he had known a week before. The narrow trail through the grass was gone, pressed flat by water or swallowed by mud. Animal tracks that once spoke clearly were smeared into shapeless marks. Streams had become loud, brown barriers. Burrows were flooded. Low berry bushes sagged under the weight of water, their fruit bruised, split, or already fermenting. The air smelled of wet earth, rotting leaves, and swollen bark, masking the faint scents that people and predators normally use to read the day. In dry weather, the ground could be a page. In endless rain, it became a page with the ink running. So hunting had to change. Large animals often avoided open, exposed places during heavy rain and wind. Deer, wild cattle, horses, or antelope might climb toward higher ground, follow ridgelines, shelter in thicker vegetation, or move along familiar routes that stayed passable when the lowlands flooded. Ancient hunters who understood the shape of their territory could guess where animals would be forced to go. A flooded stream crossing, a narrow pass between slopes, a strip of firm ground beside a marsh. These places could become natural bottlenecks. The clearest footprint was no longer the only clue. People looked for fresh droppings darkened by rain, but not yet dissolved. Broken stems, rubbed bark, displaced stones, mud disturbed in a way water alone would not make. A hoof slipping on a bank, a branch snapped at chest height, a patch of flattened reeds near a crossing. These were fragments of a story. Survival belonged to those who could read the fragments. But hunting in rain was dangerous. Wet stone and clay could betray a foot at the worst moment. A fall with a spear point, a cut from flint, a twisted ankle far from camp, any of these could become deadly when skin stayed damp and dirty. Infection was not an abstract risk. It was a swelling hand, a fever, a person no longer able to carry wood, food, or a child. So people also turned toward foods that rain made easier to find. Not every meal was heroic. Sometimes survival looked like muddy hands, trapped fish, shellfish, frogs, roots, insects, and whatever the rain had pushed into reach. Flooded margins could trap fish in shallow pools as water receded. Small animals driven from their burrows might be caught by hand, club, snare, or net. In some places, water plants offered edible roots, shoots, or seeds. Tubers hidden beneath mud could be dug up if people knew exactly which leaves marked food and which marked danger. That knowledge mattered. A root that nourished one family could resemble another, that made the stomach twist with poison. Mushrooms appeared after rain, like little miracles. But they were miracles with teeth. Some were valuable food, some could kill. Ancient gathering was not random picking. It was memory carried in the body, taught by elders, refined by mistakes, and protected by caution. Stored food became more precious with every wet day. Long before agriculture, people understood that abundance was temporary. Nuts could be collected in season and hidden in pits, baskets, skin bags, bark containers, or dry crevices. Seeds could be kept away from damp if the shelter was good enough. Meat and fish could be dried when sun and wind allowed. But in rainy periods, smoke became essential. Thin strips hung near the hearth could slowly lose moisture while absorbing compounds from the smoke that discouraged rot and insects. Fat could be rendered and stored, dense with calories, easier to carry, and valuable when fresh food was scarce. A cache was more than extra food. It was time. It was a few more days before someone had to risk a flooded crossing. It was strength for a nursing mother, an injured hunter, an elder who knew where the old dry cave stood above the valley. In harsh weather, people likely prioritized what gave the most energy for the least danger. Fat, nuts, marrow, smoked fish, shellfish, trusted roots, animals caught close to camp. Yet rain changed food into risk as quickly as it offered opportunity. Floodwater could carry waste, dead animals, and invisible parasites into pools that looked clean. Meat spoiled faster in damp warmth. Fish trapped in stagnant water might already be dying. A desperate meal could bring vomiting, weakness, or disease at exactly the moment the group needed strength. So every bite required judgment. Not just what can we eat, but what will this cost us if we are wrong? Food kept bodies alive, but survival during endless rain also depended on the hardest question. Stay or move? The hardest decision may have come after many days of doing everything right. The fire had been protected. The children had been kept warm. Food had been stretched. The shelter still stood. And yet, beyond the entrance of the cave or the edge of the camp, the valley was changing into something less familiar by the hour. For ancient humans, staying put was not weakness. A known place could mean life. It meant knowing where the dry ledges were, where roots grew, where animals passed, where stone could be struck into blades, where the wind was least cruel. But when the rain would not stop, that same familiar place could become a trap. A river that once fed the group could rise at night and erase the ground beneath them. A slope that had stood for generations could loosen, slide, and bury a shelter. A crossing that connected them to food, relatives, or safer land could vanish under brown water. Leaving was dangerous too. To walk away meant exposure. It meant carrying children through mud, moving injured people over slick stone, trying to keep embers alive in damp bark or fungus, stepping into country where predators might be hungry and other human groups might already be sheltering. In a world without maps, bridges, weather forecasts, or rescue, movement was never simple escape. It was a gamble made with the whole group's future. So people watched. They listened for the river before they saw it. A deeper roar in the night could mean water was rising upstream. They noticed when clear water turned the color of torn earth, thick with sediment, branches, and stones. They saw when the current moved faster than before, when banks began to slump away in heavy chunks, when puddles appeared where the ground had once been firm. Inside caves, new seepage along walls or dripping from cracks could warn that the rock itself was taking in too much water. Outside, cold winds, low cloud banks, saturated slopes, and animals moving uphill could all become part of the same message. Even the disappearance of a safe crossing mattered. A shallow place known for years might suddenly become a churning channel. And once the crossings were gone, the group was no longer choosing whether to leave. The landscape was choosing for them. Mobility was one of humanity's oldest survival technologies. Not just wandering. Remembered movement. Seasonal routes. High ridges used before. Fallback caves above floodlines. Temporary camps where water drained away quickly. Places where dry wood might still be found beneath overhangs. Places where good stone lay exposed for making cutting tools. Ancient people carried knowledge across landscapes, the way later societies would carry maps. And they carried only what mattered most: a child, a hide, a blade, a bundle of food, a coal protected in bark or ash, a memory of where to go next. In heavy rain, survival depended on deciding what could be replaced and what could not. A broken spear shaft might be remade. A lost ember might take days to recover. A skilled elder's memory of a flood that happened decades earlier might save everyone. This is where the group became more than a collection of bodies trying not to die. Elders remembered which valleys filled first. Toolmakers repaired points, scrapers, and bindings with cold hands. Gatherers recognized plants that were safe even in wet ground, and which ones became dangerous when contaminated by floodwater. Hunters scouted ahead, reading tracks and mud, looking for routes that would not exhaust the young and old. Caregivers kept children moving, warm, and quiet when fear spread. Shared food could keep a weaker member from being abandoned too soon. Shared memory could keep the strong from making a fatal mistake. Archaeology cannot show us every choice made in a storm, but it does show a species repeatedly living through unstable worlds. During the Pleistocene, climates shifted again and again. Rivers changed course. Coastlines advanced and disappeared. Caves became shelters, then were abandoned, then used again. Human groups occupied deserts, forests, cold steppes, mountains, and shores not because they controlled nature, but because they learned to adjust to it. Their survival was not primitive luck. It was flexible planning under pressure. Every modern roof, drainage ditch, raised road, emergency alert, and flood map rests on a much older human lesson. Long before instruments measured rainfall, people survived by watching the sky, the water, the animals, the stone, and one another. So how did ancient humans survive when the rain wouldn't stop? Not with one trick. With a system, shelter to slow the cold, fire protected like a living thing, food plans that changed with the flooded land, movement before familiar ground became a trap, and memory strong enough to outlast panic. Endless rain tested the whole human system, and ancient humans survived not by defeating the rain, but by staying just ahead of it. One dry corner, one protected coal, one safe crossing. D, one remembered shelter, one decision at a time.